The Last of Us Part 2. How can a game mess up and basically destroy what made it special? Well, we have one writer to contact, Neil Druckmann himself. So this video is just gonna be a holistic look at The Last of Us, a holistic look at the entire controversy surrounding its development and to its release, and just how its narrative just ruins the entire game. So to start off, let's talk about The Last of Us. What was The Last of Us? The Last of Us. It was an amazing game coming out in 2013 that ended the PlayStation 3 on a bang and left it at high. It's what basically made PlayStation 3 outsell the Xbox 360. And one of the core reasons about The Last of Us that made it special was its story within the fact of its relationship between Joel and Ellie. Last of Us was special really because of how it had this father and daughter relationship between the two characters, Joel and Ellie. It was never about the zombie survival. It was never about the gameplay. It was never about just trekking across America. It was always about the relationship between Joel and Ellie, and the plot revolved around building that relationship and making the player, care for Ellie and do anything basically. And then there's this whole ending scene of saving Ellie instead of, letting her die to find a cure for humanity. I mean, it was a powerful game. And so now the second game has been released. Now I'm going to be talking about this one. There's a lot wrong with The Last of Us Part 2. And it's no doubt most notably with the fact of Joel's death. Now, when Joel's death came out, it was shocking. I mean, why would Naughty Dog take this route? Like, when you explore it, there are alternative storylines they could have made that included Joel's death. And I'll discuss those later, but the first reaction when I heard about this was, why? Also, before I begin, I just want to say, never played Last of Us. Never played Last of Us 2. I have played Naughty Dog games. I've played the Uncharted series, and that's it. So, yeah, don't take me seriously or anything about this. I'm just rambling about this. But I do know the entire story of Last of Us and Last of Us Part 2. I've watched clips and gameplay footage of it all. And what we're discussing is pretty much the story. And and watching like a playthrough is enough to tell you how the story feels on a player. At least for me. It could be different for anybody. Maybe I just need to buy the game and see it for myself and see if my opinions change, whatnot. But I'm content with the fact that they will most likely stay the same. Like, there's no doubt about it. Anyways, if we're moving on, let's talk about Last of Us Part 2. And it's just really bad story. So, Last of Us Part 2 basically destroys what made Last of Us. Last of Us. Joel and Ellie's relationship with Joel and Joel's death. And we had leaks about this, and that's just the sad part. Like, they try in promotional trailers, it was evident that the players would be assuming that the fact that Joel would be in the ending. There was this idea that, yeah, Joel's going to be in there in the end, because there was like a look at an ending cutscene. But that was just revealed to be actually just a flashback, and the model was rendered differently, and there were some scenes that featured Joel that actually were another character, and those were just lines that were just copied on to sell the illusion that Joel makes it. And that's just the sad part. The deception is enough to give anger. And then there's the actual story and the leak stuff itself. Now, the leaks weren't entirely accurate. There was one part where people in the leaks that stated that Abby was transgender, when it was revealed that it was actually Abby's companion Lev that was actually transgender. I mean, still, it's a minor mishap, but for the most part, the main plot points that were leaked was spot on. Joel dies. Dina is almost killed by Abby until Ellie reveals that she's pregnant. Yeah, I mean, they were quite spot on. And I mean, what does that really mean about leaks? I mean, for the most part, they can be right, they can be wrong, whatever. I mean, this was like really before the development. I mean, if it was a lie, Naughty Dog could have come out. If the entire thing was a lie, Naughty Dog could have come out and said, hey, this ain't the plot, this is a falsified plot. But they didn't, which was enough to sell. And they were like banning YouTube videos straight right, which means this was the plot. Like, they were copy striking YouTube channels here and there. Meaning it was the plot. Meaning this was the leak content. It was the plot. It's very jarring when I think about it holistically that Naughty Dog in promotions was trying to sell something, but release something that wasn't that. Release something that was totally different in its story. That would be something players wouldn't expect. And it's so deceptive. And there are even people out there that are trying to get their refunds on Last of Us, and this is more or less a PlayStation standard. They've never been really great on refunds. But yeah, refunds are being denied. So it is jarring that Naughty Dog thought they could get away with this. Deceive gamers, deceive the players, and get away with it. That was what they were attempting to do. There's no disputing that they were just deceiving their audience. And I want to talk about the concept of subverting expectations. And this is a concept I'll talk about after talking about the entire story. Because it's very important to this discussion at what Naughty Dog was trying to do. So, let's talk about the story itself. So, we start off with Elle and Joel and Elle. They're living in Jacksonville. What's revealed is that Elle finds out that Joel lied to her about the whole hospital thing. So, yeah, she kind of has a falling out with Joel and stuff. And so Joel is sort of on his own with his brother Tommy, while Ellie settles down with her girlfriend Dina, and Dina's ex-boyfriend. So what happens is that Abby, the antagonist of the game, who is the daughter of a surgeon that was killed in the last game, when Joel was killing the surgeon trying to save Ellie. So yeah, she swears revenge against Joel, and so Abby ends up, after Joel rescues Abby from the infected, and so Abby and her group come inside. Tommy and Joel reveal who they are for some reason, which is not true to their character. They would never do such a thing. Like, these people are survivalists. They would never do something like that. That is not true to their character at all. There's no character writing that would make them do such a thing. And that is the truth of it. There's no arguing with that point. But say whatever, they reveal their identities. Abby ends up killing Joel and injuring Tommy, basically. And making Ellie watch. Basically, you watch as the character you loved, and the character that you played as, and the character that you helped make a father figure for Ellie, and help build a relationship with Ellie. You watch him get brutally murdered by a hockey stick, by a muscular, pounded girl, Abby. So the game is intending on you hating Abby now. I mean, that was an intention by Naughty Dog. We can no doubt say they knew that players wouldn't like this, and they knew that there was going to be a hatred. So, and Ellie, hates Abby, so now Ellie swears revenge, and with Tommy ahead of them, it takes Dina and Dina's ex-boyfriend on for the ride to hunt down Abby and her gang. So Ellie, soon enough, starts killing members of Abby's gang. And then the game tries to go and make you feel disgusted with your actions, with each time Ellie just losing herself every time she murders a one member. Like when she figures out that she's murdered a pregnant woman, that just like shocks her beyond belief. It's like, oh my god, oh. And it's like supposed to make you disgusted with your actions and stuff. And it's trying to shame you because you killed this person. It's trying to shame you for the violence you committed. And like, there's also parts in the gameplay where it's like, the enemy AI, if you kill like one of the enemy AIs, then the enemy AIs around them will shout out their name, trying to give some human identity inside them, and go like, oh my god, you killed this living human being. It's really not a great concept because this is a game and you're sort of forced to kill them, so the way it's trying to present itself does not work at all. Like, I mean, if it was like a movie, sure, I mean, there was a way to do that, but this is a game, and you're sort of forced to kill those people, because if you don't, they're gonna kill you. You can't progress the story and not kill them. And there's no way around it, and that's the thing. Naughty Dog is under the assumption that the player will soon feel disgusted with their actions. And that's just not gonna happen, because they're gonna be forced to do that, and then they're being... And once they do it, which is already painful enough, they're being disgusted. The game tries to shame them for doing it. I mean, it's just an overall plot set that just doesn't work. And then let's move on. So then, sure enough, Ellie meets up to Abby. They get in a fight in the theater. Tommy's injured and shot in like the shoulder. And Dina's ex-boyfriend is pretty much killed right up there. Walks into the room and is shot down. This is a really big problem with The Last of Us. With the original Last of Us, there were characters you cared about, each and every single one. You probably cared, and what I mean by that is all the main characters. You probably cared about them. You had a connection with them. You got character development. Last of Us Part 2 does nothing with character development in each of these. It focuses on character development pretty much of only Ellie and Abby, but none of the others. It spares no time in making you like or even care about certain characters, which makes the game lose much of its impact, and that's apparently shown with the death of Dina's ex-boyfriend. And the death itself is not even done in such a way to make you upset or shocked. It happens, because all he does is walk in and blam, he's gone, and they don't even focus on it. And that just shows how they treated the characters. It's just one and dones. They don't give these characters any more character. And that's the problem with The Last of Us. It loses all its immersion and impact because they don't make the player interested in any of the characters. So when these characters are killed off, there's no actual caring, and that's a problem because The Last of Us Part 2's narrative relies on the players caring about the characters that have died. But when those characters that have died don't even have any character development in them to make you care about them, why would you care about these deceased characters that the game is trying to make you care about? I've said that too many times. This is a run-on. So, moving on, then it decides to switch over to Abby's side of the story, where it tries to humanize Abby. And this is not even done well. Just like how the rest of the game set up, it's not done right. Because the whole problem is, it leads to try to show, oh, Abby is not a monster and this is that. The problem is that these are all flashbacks. The way it's set up is it's the before Joel's death thing. It shows Abby being kind, this and that, before becoming an insane and ruthless monster and murdering Joel. I mean, that's kind of the problem with... I mean, if it was also the after stuff, which it does show that. It does show Abby meeting up with Lev, taking care of Lev, and it tries to make this, Joel and Elle type relationship. It tries to make it with Abby and Lev, which, I mean, is a smart move, but, I mean, it's just copy and paste, and... Joel and Elle's relationship was built up in the first game, and here you only get like half a game to actually really and not even that, maybe a quarter of the game to really build up a relationship. So that makes it less special, really. And even in that, it's not really with one specific character. It's trying to show, oh, Abby does this, Abby does that, Abby does this, Abby does that. But while with Ellie, it's just like, oh my god, Ellie's a monster. She murders this person, she murders that person. When it forgets the stuff that Abby does, I mean, she, like, when you're fighting as Abby, you feel like this all-powerful thing, and it doesn't try to shame you for murdering these people while you're playing as Ellie. It shames you for it. It shames you for being Ellie, but if it's Abby, no, it's fine. It's fine because that's self-defense. I mean, it's just the way the narrative is set up. It's so hypocritical. That's just an easy word to say. It just goes against what it's trying to say with the Abby chapters. And then it all builds up to trying to show that, oh my gosh, Abby finding out her father died. It's trying to basically reenact the whole Joel's death and how it felt. Thing is, the player has not identified with Abby at all by the end of this. There's no actual emotion done because there were, how should I say this? Half a game of barely any character development isn't going to make players identify with a character. I mean, what was The Last of Us? It was a building around you liking both Joel and Ellie. You caring about those characters. It was an entire game's worth of that. And here you got basically less than half a game's worth of that. And then you get this cutscene. And at that point, you couldn't care less. And so then it goes on where Abby ends up fighting Ellie, and they have this brawl thing, and then Abby captures... This is back with the theater thing, where Abby captures Dina, basically, and has her pinned down and is about to cut her throat, but Ellie reveals that she's pregnant, and Abby says good, but then Lev convinces her not to, so... And yeah, she just leaves them be and hurls off. And so at this point, Tommy is basically healing from his wounds. Basically, they go on I guess a few months later. Ellie and Dina have this nice life with the baby they have, and I feel like this is where they should have just cut it off and ended it. I mean, they were showing a happy ending. I mean, from read from a lot of players' experience, they were liking the whole relationship between Ellie and Dina, which goes to show also, first of all, because this is another thing. There were complaints about the people review bombing this game and were bigots and hated LGBTQ characters. First of all, look at The Last of Us Left Behind. It was pretty much LGBTQ characters. It has a positive reception. The relationship between Joel, Ellie, and Dina was a really nice relationship. People liked it. Players liked the relationship that they showed between it. It was a pretty fun time before they decided they didn't mess up yet. They haven't screwed the plot up as much as they already have. They needed to go further, and that's what they did. So Tommy comes back and goes like, hey, I found the location of Abby. Let's go. And so Ellie, though hesitant, decides to go along with them, abandoning her happy life with Dina and her baby. So, basically, Ellie goes off, hunts with Tommy, and at the same time it shows that Abby gets captured with Lev, and they're pretty much, and by the time Ellie finds her, they're pretty much like hanging on like something there, on these like pillar sort of things. So Ellie decides, instead of killing them straight there and then, she decides, how about I let her go? And it isn't, you can't just say, people are trying to say here, oh no, she's wanting to do a big boss battle, she wants to do it. No, she wasn't doing a boss battle. How do we know that? Because when she cut them down from the ropes, from their entanglements, when Abby and Lev were basically going to the boats, Ellie just walks over to the boat, but then turns around after being reminded of Joel's dead body, after being reminded in her head about it, after like seeing it in her head, she decides to turn around and go like, let's kill Abby. And so, yeah, she threatens to kill Lev if Abby doesn't fight her. So Abby and Ellie get into this brawl, which is pretty much, yeah, it's just a little brawl. Abby basically bites off 2 fingers of Ellie's, 2 of Ellie's fingers, which, I mean, at this point, they can't really say much about players empathizing with Abby at this point. Like, they tried not showing her that, and tried to say, oh, she's not a monster. Why would you think that? But, I mean, at this point, you saw Abby kill, first of all, a character that players beloved, and then bite off the fingers of a character that players beloved. At this point, you could not sell this whole Abby's not a monster idea. It's just not happening. So let's move on. Now, let's talk about how it ends. So now we have Ellie drowning. Abby is drowning. And then, again, Ellie gets a flashback. And it's just Joel playing a guitar. That's in no context at all. Joel playing guitar. Ellie lets go and starts crying. Abby gets up and leaves. After Ellie just says, go. Just go. So yeah, Abby leaves off with Lev. And Ellie goes home and finds that Dina's basically gone and abandoned her, which, I mean, wow, okay, way to set an ending, wow. And so it all ends with now Ellie can't play Joel's guitar anymore. They cut to this flashback about which was pretty much about the whole Joel playing a guitar thing. It was about what was said there, and it was this scene about forgiveness. That was what it was about. It was about how Ellie was gonna try to forgive Joel about her time, about the whole hospital incident thing. And so that was, wow. They ended it on that, and then they show Ellie can't play the guitar. She decides to put the guitar away and just walk around an empty, lifeless house, lifeless grass and all. Pretty much all alone, and leave it there. The end. That is the worst ending ever. It's pretty much to leave you just grumpy and miserable at this point. I mean, the reason why it's a bad ending is because of the setup, because of how it tries to reach that ending. It's more of the means as such. Like the ends, like the way it ends could be achieved by so many different means. It's this whole idea, do the ends justify the means? And in this case, and pretty much throughout all of it, it doesn't. The ends do not justify the means. And the ending is Ellie pretty much miserable, and the means to get there just, no. The way they tried to get there was so, it was like a middle finger at the player. Now, I think I should now start discussing the alternative storylines. Because I'm not going to sit here and complain and say, oh, Joel's death is a bad concept. Because, in honest opinion, it's not a bad concept. It's just the way the story, how Naughty Dog tried to execute it, it was just mismanaged. And it's what just led to the hatred of pretty much the game. It's why this game's narrative isn't good. It has concept, but in its execution, it doesn't do it right. It messes up each and every single step and doesn't. It's as if they weren't self-aware. They were on autopilot. They decided to write a rough draft, and they decided not to even have anyone find the flaws. They were like, "Oh, pretty great rough draft. All right, first story we come up, rough draft done. All right, let's start on it." Like they didn't even try to check the flaws of it. They didn't even try to rewrite it or anything. And from what was revealed, what was going to be the original script, it was so much better. And when I'm talking about the original, as in like there was the alternative story they're going to be talking about, which didn't include Joel's death or anything. It was like something else entirely. And it was better than what this was. Why didn't they stick with that? It was just that this whole thing sounds great in concept, but the way to get there is very specific. There are very specific stuff, and I'm going to start naming what they could have done in preparation for this event. Joel's death, mainly, which is the most pinnacle thing about this. It's the pinnacle of this entire discussion. Joel's death. Why did Joel die? And then there's the after discussion of what happens with the plot and everything. So, alternate storylines. They could have made an entire game as the sequel, Last of Us 2, Abby chapters, which are just about Abby. They build up her character and everything. They make you like her. They show her with companions and all, and this and that. And they just make it just that. And then they show the scene of which. Then they show it really goes all the way to the end to show Joel kills then Sir Abby's father. That, I think, would create so much. That would be a bang of an ending for the second game. Basically, what happens is you start off with before the surgeon's death. Start off with Abby, and basically build her up as a character with the Fireflies, learning companionship, survival, this and that, and then show Joel murdering the surgeon, showing how when Abby finds, show the shock. And at this point, the player is already invested and likes Abby in an entire game. And then they realize what they did with the first game of saving Ellie, what they were doing to get there. The means to get there, to get to the official end. It's a huge moral thing that they could have used. They could have made that, and that would make a phenomenal game. It made you question Joel. It made you think about it. It made you first, because you're so connected to Abby, it makes you question then Joel, who's another character. Which one is in the right? Who's in the right? And then they have the third game, where it shows where you're already emotionally invested with Abby. It shows Abby murdering, finding and hunting down and murdering Joel in front of Ellie's eyes. And at this point, you're at an emotional dilemma. At this point, Naughty Dog has control of the player's emotions. The player not only cares about the characters on Abby's side, they care about the characters on Ellie's side as well. I mean, stick with the main characters like Tommy, and what happens is, I think within this third game, which would be basically the plot of Last of Us Part 2, which is, it's all just centered around Ellie. And now you're just you see the whole thing happen, and now you're trying to hunt down Abby. And, like, it's such an emotional roller coaster, because then you're killing off characters that you know and love, basically Abby's friends, that you're basically killing off. But before, you already know and love them, and it's like, it's emotional trauma. They could have worked off with that. But no. That's my alternate storyline. A second game which makes the player build a relationship with Abby. And then the third game to test it all out. To test which is stronger. And then when you're going... And also cut the ending out, because the ending was not set up properly as well. There are certain things that weren't set up properly in this game that really should be changed. And that being when you reach the theater scene, as Ellie, as I'm saying, and then you get down into a fight, and then you are close to killing Abby, and the whole choice is this. Do you kill Abby after what she's done? And the whole thing... Honestly, no, I'm thinking of this in my head. I think we should cut that. See, here's what I think. I should think it that first it's pretty much Ellie's side of the story, the whole reaction shock, and then they reach the theater scene, and where then they go with the Abby side of the story, right? They play through it, they show Abby after the killing, and then seeing the shock of her friends getting murdered, and you as a player, oh my god. And so then you go off to theater, and yeah, and you try, and it's Abby's choice to either kill or spare Ellie. You as a player choose. Do you kill Abby and let the cycle of violence continue, or do you spare her? Obviously, the choice would be to spare Ellie. And so that's the way they should have made the game, I think. Or they could have, gone with a completely different story because that's what's broken. The story is broken. It's complete trash. It has key concepts that are great and all, but it's the way it tries to connect them together is broken apart and just weak. As a player, you're not interested, you're not emotionally entangled with it like you were with the first game. And that's just the main problem of Last of Us Part 2. There's no emotional entanglement, there's no justification for some events happening at all. Like, first of all, how Abby found Ellie at the theater, which was all because Ellie decides to drop her map at the aquarium where Abby finds her friends dead. I mean, there's no justification for some of the settings. It's just, they go there. That just happens. It's lazy writing. And that's just the main complaint of Last of Us Part 2. It's all just done without reasoning. All settings that happen, they just happen. And the main theme is just the cycle of violence. And it was a very nice article came out from Kotaku, really. And it surprised me. Kotaku actually makes a good article. It was about, and they're one of the few sites that gave a negative review of The Last of Us story. They stated that the game sort of makes you feel dumb. It's as if you're now just learning that the cycle of violence is bad. The theme is something that, sure, you can explore, but at the same time, the way they did it just made you feel dumb. It's as if they're trying to say, oh, violence is bad, violence is bad. At the same time, isn't that common sense? And the writer himself, he made a very great point. He was like, it's as if the guys are trying to make me feel dumb or something. Half the way, he started questioning if Naughty Dog thought so low of the players. So the theme is something just so random and something people already know. It's nothing new. It's nothing, like Metal Gear. Now, let's address the oddballs in the room. A lot of game journalists out there, though not all, plenty of them, like, for example, IGN gave the game a perfect score, like a 10 out of 10. Now, there was a very nice video from an ex-IGN employee to point out that IGN scores are not really, the 10 out of 10 scores aren't really 10 out of 10s. And I can see with multiple games. It's not just The Last of Us 2 that got a 10 out of 10 from IGN. There are plenty of other games, and yeah, no, 10 out of 10 is never going to ever happen. Her video very much points out the whole thing of a game journalist 10 out of 10 sort of thing, or more or less that it's a very high quality media. But that's the thing. Last of Us isn't a high quality media. I don't think the issue is about a 10 out of 10 or perfect beyond perfect score. I think the issue is, first of all, a perfect score, just 9 out of 10. And if the game got a 9 out of 10, that's also, that wouldn't appease people. And this game is not a 0 out of 0. I know, but there's journalists out there that are willing to go like, oh, gamers give it a 0 out of 0. They're not going to mention the good stuff. We recognize there are good stuff about it. I mean, gameplay is nice, though there are major criticisms about stealth enemy AI design and how it's not fitting. And what I'm trying to say, it's a problem that existed in the first game, except it now goes with your character as well, and it completely ruins the immersion. And that's the whole thing. Is with the first game, it was that the enemy AIs would only be hunting you and not the side character Ellie. So if they saw Ellie, they wouldn't go after and try to kill her as well, and basically detect you. But I mean, in The Last of Us Part 2, the stealth enemy AI, it's not even there. If they see you, they're not even gonna care because they've made it linear. They've made it in this way of the only enemy AI has a certain area that they're gonna be patrolling as such. So unless you get in their area, they're not gonna come after you. It's like an MMO design sort of thing. If you've played any MMOs and you know like how unless you get in their circle, they're not gonna come after you even if you're right in front of them. And so that's just what kills immersion with the fact that this game is trying to take itself seriously. That's really, really bad. Graphics wise, I mean, it's Naughty Dog. Why wouldn't they be bad? I feel like a lot of game journalists now are just over bloating. Oh, the graphics are amazing. The graphics are amazing. Why aren't you including that? The thing is, it's a Naughty Dog standard. This game isn't being judged as a video game. It's being judged as a Naughty Dog video game. It's being judged as a video game from a studio who's known for making high quality video games. That's why it's getting a lot of bad press. Because people aren't judging it as a video game. They're judging it as a video game by Naughty Dog. And it's a game that's tarnishing what was considered quality by Naughty Dog, who made Naughty Dog consider a quality studio. The game tarnishes that reputation. That's the problem. The graphics and sound have always been great within Naughty Dog games. Look at the original Last of Us. I mean, it showed the huge and amazing power of PlayStation 3. And just like the original Last of Us Part 2 shows the amazing power of PlayStation 4's graphical capabilities. They push the edge, just like with the original Last of Us. That's not a surprise. It's not something big, bold, and amazing about it. I mean, if it was from an indie studio that wasn't known for this type of thing, then whoa, yes, kudos to them. But it's a standard for Naughty Dog already, so that's why not many people really care about the graphics, because we know the graphics are going to be good. We know the standards of quality of Naughty Dog. The graphics pass. Done. And if we're judging this out of a Naughty Dog game, yeah, graphics pass. 2 out of 2. The way I review games is more of a 10 on scale, and I did say didn't want to. I'm just going to give my thoughts on it. Even if I haven't played the game, I'm just going to give my score sort of thing. And it's an out of 10 one. The way I set it up is gameplay is 5 points, story narrative is 3 points, and graphics and sound is 2 points. 1 point for the graphics, 1 point for the sound. And yeah, Last of Us gets the 2 points there. Gameplay wise, the major complaints are pretty much about the stealth AI design, stealth enemy AI design not being that great. Another major complaint that did appear in some reviews is it has the same exact gameplay as the original Last of Us. Obviously, I have never played both games, so I don't know. I mean, when I was watching the YouTube videos, I was probably bored. I'm going to be honest right there. I was just bored watching it. I mean, for me, all the environments just looked the same. I mean, it was pretty much all just grassy areas. With Uncharted, you got, different types of areas. You got tombs, you got castle, you got the desert, you got a ship. I mean, they're all different environments. With Last of Us, it's just Seattle. It's so monotonous. And the gameplay, from what people are saying, it's pretty much a copy and paste of the original Last of Us. Now with, worse enemy AI, except now the enemy AI have names to, serve the story side. And that's really then jarring. If this is a really, really true thing, that it's pretty much 2013 gameplay therefore, which, I mean, there are a few changes that I know of, so I think that is a true thing, that it is pretty much. And then I think if like a new player was trying to figure out what they should buy, then they should just buy the original Last of Us, not get even part 2. I mean, I'm not even sure why they would get part 2 first and not part 1, because I mean it is a story-driven game. But like in any case, it just shows that like there's no need to buy this game at all. There's no point. I mean, if you're there for some reason for the gameplay, which I doubt anyone is at all, then yeah, just get the original Last of Us. If you're there wanting to play the Naughty Dog games, or just play Uncharted. And in it all, if you're looking at a score for it, I give it a 3.5 out of 5. The gameplay, there are a few innovations were really nice, but I mean there's nothing new, groundbreaking or changing from what I've heard and what I've seen comparing gameplay of The Last of Us Part 2. So innovation is really one point that you can get with gameplay, because gameplay is a very important aspect of a video game, and when it comes to the next game, it's a very important point. Did you innovate your gameplay? And for this game specifically, the answer is no. There's going prone, but that's not much. And then the another of half point I'm taking out is enemy AI design. While the basic design of it for an action adventure is pretty good, the stealth sections lose 0.5 cut, because they can't have it where the design is good for one part of the genre but not for the stealth. Moving on, the rest of the parts with the actual combat, pretty great. And yeah, the basic immersive of the game, I'm not going to complain about that. The gameplay is serviceable, basically. It's alright. It's pretty good. I mean, it's nothing really great, like if you... Yeah, because Last of Us, really, it's all about story. So, gameplay-wise, not many people have complaints. It's pretty much a 3.5 out of 5. Now, let's talk about the story. Story is a 1 out of 3. The way it's the plot itself, first of all, with the first game, you have this where the plot revolved around Joel and Ellie's relationship. With this one, it's pretty much the plot is just a plot. It doesn't revolve around anybody's relationship, which ruins any type of character development that could have happened, that could have made one of the characters stand out, or maybe, make players empathize with Abby. Yeah, that never happened. I do want to also touch on one last point. There was this channel out there, I think, called Girlfriend Reviews, and what they did, they put this video up, not only their, girlfriend review of The Last of Us Part 2, but this video called Understanding Last of Us Part 2. I very much disagree with a lot of things that I said. They tried to make this whole thing of it's a piece of art because it makes you feel this emotional stuff. They showed off the scene. I watched their stream of them playing it. They had this one moment where they're at the ending where it was like they couldn't choose if they had to, it was one of those scenes where you're button mashing and you have to press the button all the way in time as many times as possible, to get the action going, and couldn't decide if, they should allow Ellie to kill Abby or not, and whatever. They were so conflicted. And they were like, that's an example of good writing. That's not. Their review is very much, their critiques and all are very easy to criticize. You can just go make a video about it and pretty much point out all the faults in their video about it. It's very trying. I mean, they're a comedy channel in any case, and it's just one channel. It would be a waste of time to actually even do it as such. But I mean, it's the commentary community, whatever. I mean, in the end of the day, while there's so many inaccuracies with the review, I think there's one thing we need to now touch on. The concept of subverting expectations. This is a very big concept that was presented in Star Wars The Last Jedi, and if you know my channel, You know, I hate The Last Jedi. I've nitpicked the video. I've already made a video nitpicking it to death. Alright, let's just stick it with here and move on. So, Last Jedi is being compared to the Last of Us Part 2. And that's actually a nice comparison, actually. I would agree with the comparison. They are pretty similar in the way they worked. Last of Us the original was a respected game. Original Star Wars series, well-respected movies. Last Jedi pretty much retcons and does some, very BS stuff to its characters. Last of Us 2 does some BS stuff to its characters. They're pretty much the same thing, and the word subverting expectations was thrown around as if it was a good thing for The Last Jedi. And it's been a word now that's thrown around about the story of The Last of Us Part 2, how it subverts expectations, how it makes you think you're going to get this, but oh my god, you're actually getting this. I feel like this term has now lost all meaning. It's becoming a common defense for bad writing. It's becoming this statement of, oh, I subverted expectations, that's why you don't like it. Instead of, oh, I made a plot point that just didn't work out right, but I decided to stick with it anyway, even if it's contradictory to the entire character development of a story. I mean, that's the whole thing. It's ruined this idea when now a publisher says they're trying to subvert expectations, because now we have two examples of it in a negative output. And that's just the problem with it. You have now two examples of subverting expectations being a negative thing. I still think the thing does have some concept behind it. Like, you can make something that does, subvert the expectations, lead your audience to believe one thing, but then surprise them with something else. But that must be done. If that's going to be done, you have to make sure it stays true. It stays true to the core of your franchise, of your series. It has to stay true to the core, true to the spirit. Last Jedi and Last of Us Part 2 don't do that. They pretty much strip apart and destroy what their core is. And that's the problem with them. And now you hear rumors about them just deciding to, decanonize the sequel trilogy, which I'm all for. I'm all for, and a lot of Star Wars fans are all for decanonizing the sequel trilogy. And that's just what's going to happen probably with Last of Us. They're probably going to decanonize it. Or they're probably just going to get rid of the series entirely, abandon it. This is its ending. Well, like Uncharted's now done and all. Last of Us is all done and all. Honestly, in my opinion, they should have just left The Last of Us without a sequel. Without anything else. I mean, sure, left behind DLC, nice and all, a little addition. But after that, nothing else. Nothing, just leave it the way it is. Because it was already conflicting enough. With the whole ending and everything. And like I said, a lot of people were hesitant with this sequel announcement. And it goes to show that this sequel just was unnecessary to begin with. It should just never have happened at all. And I think that I do want to say what's really sad about it is just I feel just really bad about the fact that they spent all this time, so many years, in developing this. I'm pretty sure they did take time in development. What upsets me is the fact that not once did they decide to review their script, review their plot, review and see, does this stick to the core of Last of Us? Or is this pretty much retconning everything? Is this destroying what made our original game special? And that's just it. That's just this is why The Last of Us 2 was just not good. And these are all my thoughts on the whole thing. I mean, in the end, there's not much else to say. Plenty of channels have spoken out about their criticisms of The Last of Us, YouTubers, plenty of game journalists have pointed out the defenses on going like, what annoys me is now this whole narrative is being pushed because the game has LGBTQ characters. The only reason why the game is being criticized is because gamers hate LGBTQ characters, when that's not the case. And that's annoying me to death, but I mean, that will just pass on and happen. That's just gonna happen. That's gonna be a common defense for lazy and bad writing. There's a really nice article going around out there just pointing out how the entire discourse and criticism of the game is getting hard to talk about, because it pointed out how Naughty Dog, well, Sony actually, but basically through Naughty Dog, they reached out to this one site, I think it was Vice, who gave a negative, not really a great review. It gave, I think, a negative review about the plot, about the game itself. And Sony reached out and was like, we don't agree with this. We want to know why it got this rating. And so, and yeah, the guy was surprised by this, because this doesn't really happen. It doesn't. I mean, and so, I mean, he did have the conference. He talked about his criticism and qualms with the game as such. And that just goes to show Naughty Dog itself, Neil Druckmann, the creative director behind this entire thing, is very much silencing himself to criticism, and so is Naughty Dog, which is making the entire discussion around it, with plenty of sites out there, and Neil Druckmann basically going around and saying, oh, people who don't like it are bigots now, this game was approved by these people, and so that means it's perfect no matter what, because they say it's perfect. He's using that as his defense, as his blockade against actual common criticism, which is now upsetting to see. There are journalists out there that have qualms and criticisms about the game. Like, it surprises me. Polygon, Kotaku, those guys criticized the game. Well, honestly, actually doesn't even surprise me. They always, though there are like some points where they are dishonest. Most of the time, it's really more or less about review stuff that they do that has some issues, but like their reviews of them were pretty much not favorable to Last of Us, and that's also one thing that surprises me, and that's just the way it is. There are people out there who don't like The Last of Us, and they are very genuine criticisms that should have been addressed, that Neil Druckmann needs to see. He thinks right now he has a high and mighty masterpiece that people hate because they're bigots. That needs to stop. He needs to recognize that his game, he needs to read the criticism, and he needs to recognize his game isn't that good as he thinks it is. The story isn't that good as he thinks he is. He needs to realize that the concepts that he tries to put into it were not executed properly. He needs to realize that while he might have some good concepts, he should have done it in a different way. But no, he's not going to open himself up. And Naughty Dog has pretty much shut them out. Now, will there be a sequel to Last of Us 3? Please no. I don't think anyone wants a sequel anymore of Last of Us. I'm pretty sure they're done with the series, and what else does Naughty Dog produce now? I mean, Uncharted is over. Let me search this up. What else is Naughty Dog? What else do they produce now? Alright, let's see. Naughty Dog, developer. What are they known for? What is it? Okay. List of Naughty Dog video games. Okay, Math Jam. Ski Craze, Dream Zone, Keep the Thief, Rings of Power, Way of the Warrior, Crash Bandicoot. Oh yeah, Crash Bandicoot, they could continue on. Jak and Daxter, sure. Crash Team Racing, Jak 2, Jak 3, Jak X. They could continue the Jak series, I don't know. Yeah, Jak and Daxter collection. I mean, they could make another game with that. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's just Last of Us and Uncharted, where it's other games. Honestly, or they could just take on an entirely new IP, make another story-driven game, since they're good at that stuff, but something good, something that's not with the bad writing of Last of Us Part 2. And that's, I think, all what people want from Naughty Dog now. A new IP without the bad writing of Last of Us Part 2. And if not that, just leave the industry, I guess, then. Last of Us 2, it's not a good game. It is far from ever being a perfect game. It is far from reaching the high level status of what some journalists are giving it. It's not that praiseworthy at all. It has a very not so good storyline, and I'm looking at right now, there's so many. Washington Post, the trans narrative in Last of Us Part 2 is so compelling. There's so much to be done. No, it's not. I mean, is there any? I mean, it's just Lev there. I mean, we don't get to learn more about Lev, so. Oh yeah, Forbes reported Ghost of Tsushima shatters PlayStation 4's new IP sales record with 2.4 million units in 3 days. So yeah, Ghost of Tsushima is selling better than like Last of Us. When we put the Last of Us. Okay, I mean, at this point, most articles are not covering the entire, thing. Alright, at this point, there's not really much to say. It has a 2.7 out of 5 rating on Google. Pretty much, it's mixed or average reviews. 54% of Google users like this game. Honest Game Trailers, they made a really good video about this. That it's a comedy series like Girlfriend Reviews, but they made a really good video as such. They have some really nice criticism and qualms about it. It's quite hilarious at some points, but it's a general consensus of the general community consensus is Last of Us Part 2 is mixed or average reviews. So it's right down in the middle. Like my review, a 6.5 out of 10. Anyways, if you like this very, very long discussion of Last of Us Part 2, please consider subscribing. Otherwise, goodbye.